unmute my mic. Unmuted my mic. Good morning and welcome to the Science of Mind textbook conversations. My name is Laura, and of course, we're here on New Thought Media Network, sharing today more about this amazing book, The Science of Mind and Spirit textbook, written, compiled, synthesized by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And this is the 1937 edition. And today we are looking at a really interesting chapter. Oh my gosh, this chapter is filled, and I'm just amazed at the studying, extra studying, more studying and learning and intrigue that I have had in the past couple of weeks, delving in more fully into this. There we go. Good morning, into this chapter in the textbook. I'm really excited. Good morning from Roy. It's great to be with you here in Colorado today. And of course, this is a conversation. It used to be the lecture series. Now it's a conversation. And so I'm welcoming your thoughts, your ideas, your experiences with this chapter, with this chapter as we go along. I've created some slides just so that you know. I have popped the link in the text underneath. They're available for you. If I don't get through everything, the slides are there so that you can have them to peruse over and watch back with this video at any other point that you choose to. So let's delve in today. Now, this chapter that I'm going to be talking about and bringing to light is chapter 21. It's page 347, and it is called Some Phases of the Subjective Life. In fact, I'm going to put my other glasses on because then I can see the book more properly, more clearly. Some Phases of the Subjective Life. Wow, that really caught me from the get-go. Some phases. He's saying there that, you know, there are different phases and he's going to talk about them. He's only going to talk about some of them. And the interesting thing is if we look at the chapter before last week, when Reverend Mark was talking about the difference between mystics and psychic, and the next week we're talking about finding the Christ within, the I am, the divine Christ consciousness within. I think this chapter sits really neatly in between those two, because here he's delving in to the subjective side of life. Now, as I was looking at this and reading it, I went back to the 1920 the earlier edition. I think it's 26. I need to know the date of that textbook. I went back to that textbook because this is really interesting. This particular chapter talks about aspects of the subjective side of life. The subjective mind, race suggestion, subjective mind and inspiration, mental atmospheres, tuning in on thought, streams of consciousness, and the spirit of prophecy. And what he's doing in here is he's letting us know that there are different ways in which we can access truth. And yet, many of these are limited, because there's really only one way that we know that we can open up to the limitless. There's really one thing we're aiming for here, which is mind. But it's not my mind or your mind. Although, yes, our minds are a part of the one mind, he's telling us that there is something else, something greater, the infinite here, that we can access really easily when we're doing these practices. So he begins by saying that we don't have two minds. We have a dual aspect of mentality, which we're now calling, on which he's calling, the objective and the subjective states of consciousness. So he goes straight in here to let us know that we have an objective, which is the way that we're seeing the world, the way that spirit comes through, and then a subjective, which we could call the subconscious. So he's differentiating here between conscious and a subconscious mind. and yet it's still one mind. It's one thing happening in two different ways. So we receive this inspiration consciously, and yet it is held subconsciously. And the objective mind is that part of the mentality which functions consciously. It's the part of us which is self-knowing. This is spirit. This is spirit coming through us, inspiring us, the intelligence, if you like, coming through. And the subjective mind, he's saying, is our mental emanation in universal subjectivity. Now, the interesting part for me is where he, you see, I think chapter, I'm just going to say this right now, I think he's kind of half-hearted on this chapter. I've always been a little bit disappointed with this chapter, this section of the textbook, because I believe that he had an opportunity to really, really go deep into the subconscious and the subjective side of life. But he's kind of pulled back and held back. And there's a reason for this, is because as he's going on, he's talking about all these different ways: psychic, telepathic, prophesizing. And as we read further, you'll begin to see that he's really skimming the surface to tell us that there's a higher level, there's a higher place that we can come from. Always there's a higher place. But he's kind of breaking it down. And in the very beginning on page 347, he says he certainly doesn't wish to deviate from that which psychology teaches about the mind of man in its conscious and subconscious or subjective states. So I'm just going to put this up here because I thought this was really interesting. As I started working through my slides, I created something for you which shows us that, where can we go? Which shows us he's not suggesting that psychology is he's not ignoring the psychological aspect of the subjective side of life. But what he is saying is there's something other, there's something more going on, something deeper, something more expansive that is not limited by our brain. So he's saying that he's not denying the psychological element, the psychological aspects of the subconscious, but he knows that our individual subconscious, subjective, is the universal subjective. And this is what we know of as law, or we know of it as mind. We know of it as the infinite. So he's saying that we can't just compress ourselves into our brain. Our brain is not making the consciousness here. There's something else that's happening that's coming through us. And this is what all of these mystics have known. And these are the mystics, the particular mystics that I believe that there, and of course there are others. I couldn't fit them all on the page, but we can go back to Plato and to and Platonius and Emma Curtis Hopkins even, and Thomas Troward and the master teacher and Quimby, because Quimby knew at the very beginning when he was working with mesmerism and he was working with hypnotism, he then knew that there was something greater going on. And this is Holmes' psychology of it, and we can ourselves from that human perspective, and yet there's something far greater, and this is consciousness, that is the infinite, that is the transcendent, if you like. So when it comes to this, which is our psychological, we know that we've been told old, you know, we have that our conscious mind is maybe, and the subconscious mind is really what is running the show, because we store and we hold majority of our beliefs in the subconscious mind. And yet he's not telling us anywhere in this chapter how to change our habits in our subconscious mind. He's not talking about affirmations. He's not talking about mantra. He's not giving any clues as to, well, how do we do this other than to access the infinite. It's almost like he's saying, well, don't even try to change the program. And nowadays, you know, we have so many experts in the field, and neuroscientists and quantum physicists and spiritual teachers who are telling us that, or showing us that we can change from the human perspective. And he's bypassing all of this. He's just saying, go straight to the infinite. And this will do it. Spiritual mind treatment will do it. And of course, be aware in our daily moment by moment behaviors and actions and words, because every word is a prayer. And yet he's saying, let's just delve straight into the infinite here. I'm with you today. Yes, hello. I'm with you here as well. It's great to be with you. We'll be able to comment later. Wonderful. You're on listen mode. That's great. I love it if you're on listen mode. So he goes on to say that the subjective mind is the seat of all memory, and it contains a remembrance that everything that's ever happened. And this isn't just my life or your life or each of our lives. This is everything. So what he wants to say here that there is this mass consciousness, this race consciousness, he calls it. And let's not get too hung up on the word race, because what he's really meaning by that is a mass of consciousness that is the idea in our humanness that has been imprinted into the universal subjective. And he goes deeply into talking about race consciousness. And something that I think is really interesting is that he's beginning to let us know here is that we can communicate with each other. He's talking about telepathy, and that we can actually tune into each other. We can read each other. We can send messages to each other through our minds, through our thinking. And that the meaning of influence, mental influence, is a really real thing, because we're creating our atmosphere with our thoughts and with our words and with our attitude. You know, sometimes I think that the statement, let me take this off for now, change your thinking, change your life, can be, computer go, can be quite abrupt, and it can kind of leave one thinking, well, if this is what I'm being asked to do and can't actually do, I mean, it's written on the back of the book here, it can leave one feeling a little bit like they're getting properly, and so our life, or we're not thinking the right way, and so our life isn't working in the right way or the way we want it to work. And I just would like to kind of say that this is an eternal process, because if we believe that the soul is forever unfolding and we are eternal in the spirit, in the soul, as the soul, that our soul is eternal, that we are immortal, then we are on a continuum, a spiral of learning and unfolding and evolving. And so that change may not be because we want to change our life because there's a guilt going on, or you know, I've got it wrong and I want to change and I haven't got it right. This is a change because I know that I'm immortal. And so as I'm making those choices, I'm setting something else in motion right here and now for the evolution of my soul, or of this soul that is my body right now. So Ray's suggestion is meaning that we can make changes here. We can be aware of what we're saying, what we're thinking, and that we can be aware of the atmosphere of what it is that we're intending for our lives and the unfolding moment by moment of our lives. He's also saying that every city and every town and every country has a consciousness, a race consciousness, and that we can notice that wherever we're living, that some towns feel more vibrant, some cities feel more vibrant, some feel less, some feel less energized. And this is because of the thought processes of the people living in those places, and of course the energetics of the earth and what has gone on for years and years and years and years before. Because everything is stored. There's a storehouse here. So everything which has ever happened on this planet has left its imprint on the walls of time. And this is the piece. There's a tendency on the part of all of us to reproduce the accumulated subjective experiences of the human race. So what he's saying is that we are kind of pre-programmed to repeat past behaviors. And that's in our thoughts and in our thinking and in our beliefs. And yet we're expecting things to be different for our lives. Now, I would think that right here in the book that he would have gone straight into, well, this is how we can make a change here. Let's zoom in on spiritual mind treatment, or let's look at the atmosphere of your life and how we can become more aware of the thoughts and the beliefs that we have. But he doesn't go that way, really. What he does do is to say that he starts talking about he starts talking I'm going to skip that bit. He starts talking about lost my plot here. More deeply about thought transference, which he calls telepathy. I think the piece that I'm really picking up on here is that when I looked at the first book, he really delved into all sorts of topics that include things like black magic and ghosts and crystals and suggestion and psychics and clairvoyance. And it was almost as if he was experimenting there, because he knew that there were many people that were involved and interested in that level of thought. And he had to bring that into this book. He wanted to bring that into this book. But he wanted to, and why I was saying from the beginning that he's placed it in between these two chapters is because I feel that he wanted to say there's a higher way of looking at all of this. That even if all of this is going on, the psychic, the telepathic, even the clairvoyant, even if all of this is going on, that they're still using the universal subjective. So it's a limited way. It's a limited way of tapping in. But the thing is that he's saying is that it's not an unimportant way. He doesn't ever say it's not necessary. It's almost as if he's saying, well, there are levels, there are layers here, and we can access thought and thought transference, and we can transfer thought, and we can look into the future by looking at the past. And yet all of this is the one mind as well. So we come from that higher place, knowing that there's something else that's happening, and he's daring us to take that leap, into this heaven within, and to live from this place, and to have our daily living and being and knowing from this place of the divine, of spirit, of mind, and to live from that higher place, the mystical, what the mystics knew. And yet he's written about this in here in this book. It's interesting because somehow he's saying that it still matters that we can access beyond the five senses. And there may be a route to this, and there may be a way of us becoming interested in it. And maybe he's saying this in here because he's wanting people that are psychics and are clairvoyants and are telepathics to tune into his teaching, that there's something greater. I think there's an underlying message in here within the book. I mean, he says on page 351, we are surrounded by all sorts of vibrations, and if we wish to catch any of them distinctly, we must tune in. So there's an invitation. We got to tune in. But he's asking us to tune into all sorts of vibrations. And he's also saying that there's a great deal of interference if we're doing this, and we don't always get the messages clearly. And we're still then working with thought. Now, when we're in spiritual mind treatment, when we're using spiritual mind treatment and we're doing this for our lives, we're going beyond thought. We're going beyond the law. We're going beyond any idea of effect. And we're going straight to first cause, spirit. We're going to that thing itself that he talks of, that is the unchangeable, that is the changeless, that is the infinite and eternal. And if we think of this, I'm going to try and get the slide up here. If we think of the metaphysical charts that he has that he's put in the back of the book, where there is this evolution and evolutionary kind of process. Can't get it here, but anyway, I'll do it. We know that spirit thing itself is then law. So it's like this idea is coming through and into the law, and the law is propelling it into effect, into the world of form. It manifests through law. And he's really saying here, let's just kind of go back to the thing itself. Let's even go beyond any effect, any feeling, any thought, and come back to the thing itself, which is not my human idea of what life looks like in this moment. It's not a perception. It's the truth. It's principle. Really, it's beyond principle. It's this divine light, life, love, beauty, joy, harmony, as Troward calls it, these seven aspects of the divine. And this is where treatment is really is where we're being called to treat from, of course, from this place. And that's why we have these steps. And if we're using absolute, where we're just tuning into those two steps of treatment, we're not even needing to realize anything to manifest as our experience, because we are then in this place, which is he's talking about here. This subjective is really kind of like a roadmap in a way, but where are we prepared to go all the way back on that road to the thing itself and to live from that place and to allow that to be the way that we live our lives? That takes courage, because we all want and desire things for our lives. It takes courage to surrender and to come away from any sense of human will, where thought is the thing that is running the show. It takes courage to come back to that place of beingness and to live from there. And this is the place that the divine resides as being. So let's carry on here, because it's really interesting. He talks about mediums, and he's saying that the medium reads the book of remembrance and is marvelous how far-reaching this book may be. So he's saying that the psychic is good at picking up on people's thoughts there and then. So there's telepathy, and there's the psychic, which are kind of they're not really the same, but they are. They're looking at the psyche, the mind, and then the medium will go back into someone's life and pick up the story of life and read that story. And then he goes straight into prophecy, where he's saying, and then there are those that can take that story and go forwards with that and prophesize what is going to happen in the future. And yet we know that even with a prophecy, I mean, we're making prophecy all day long and every day when we're affirming for something, or when we're stating this is how we want our lives to be. I mean, of course, that's not, a prophecy is saying this will be happening. But we can be the prophets of our own lives. We can say, this is going to happen. I see this happening. And it will outpicture, if we dare to live from that belief and that faith of that happening. But he's talking about prophecy from another aspect of it here. He's saying that it's the fact that prophecy is dealing with a field in which there's no past and no present and no future, but merely a continuation of being. Ernest Holmes, I believe, was really interested in mind, not just from the point from the divine, but from how human beings use our minds and how we are using mind, the one mind. And I think if he were here today, I think he would also be an incredible psychologist, because I think that so much has moved on in the past 100 years since, or nearly 100 years since this writing of this book. I mean, I know that he passed and transitioned in 1963 or 3, or was it 4, my birthday? But I think since then, even in the last 50 years, so much has come through in the way that we can use our minds to access and to change and transform the way that we see the world and the way that we see our worlds. But what I really do like is there is a sense of, with him, is that even though he's investigating all of these different ways through through telepathy and the psychic and the medium and the prophecy, he's coming back to the truth that there is one mind, and that we can go straight to the one mind. We can use this with spiritual mind treatment. We can use it for our lives to change our lives. So let's go to here. I just want to, in the back of the book, he talks about, if you go to the directory on page 580, I want to read this consciousness. Consciousness is a mental awareness. Consciousness is both objective and subjective, and yet is one thing. Objective consciousness is a state of conscious awareness equipped with will, decision, and discrimination. This is our logical mind. Its reasoning is both inductive and deductive. Therefore, it has self-choice. The subjective, the subconscious, is entirely a reaction to this objective volition. So the subconscious responds or reacts to the conscious with the conscious. The subconscious is creative, but not discriminative. So it does what it's told. It is, of course, conscious, but it's not self-conscious. It is conscious in the same sense that the soil is conscious of the seed. It knows how to produce a plant, but it's not conscious that it's producing it. It has no reflective, deductive, or discriminating factors. It's compelled by its very nature to accept and create. And that's the iceberg that I showed you before, that the subconscious is doing its thing. And it will go back to the past and use the memories of the past as the template for that wheel to keep creating in the now until we interrupt it. When we speak of mind in its self-conscious state, we mean spirit, whether we think of it as God or as human. When we speak of consciousness in a subjective state, we refer to the mental medium, the universal subjective, which is also the subjectivity of man. So there he's taking it further. We have our conscious state as objective, then our subjective, and the subjective is the universal subjectivity also. There is no separation between me and the thing itself. This is really powerful, really powerful. And this is why I believe that, yes, he's sprinkled this throughout the whole book. And I would have loved for him to write a much more detailed chapter on this, or two on this, like really, really. I know he has, but it would have been just really, really good, I think, if he would have really, really gone further. So in referring to the subjective state, the Bible uses the word soul. The psychoanalyst uses the term unconscious, and the psychologist subjective or subjective consciousness. All have the same meaning. He was living in a time where language, well, his language, he had a lot of different words for the same thing. And it can get very confusing. Hello, Franklin. It's good to be here with you. It can get very confusing. Even, I'm sure. I mean, I'm forever looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, what did he mean there? What did he mean there? It's the same. It's a slightly different, same. And this can throw us a little bit because he's, hi, watching from Geneva. How are you? This can throw us a little bit because it's almost as if he's, I think sometimes being so particular with these different ways of talking, he's synthesizing from many other people that had written many things in his time. So he's, Thomas Troward is a major influence for his writings and his teachings. Emma Curtis Hopkins, and of course the slide that I showed you at the very beginning of some of the other major influences that use these words, and he's bringing all of the words in. So in many ways, a lot of these different words mean the same thing, and it can get confusing. But the one thing that isn't confusing is that this mind is not my mind, and it's not your mind. And it's not our mind, it's the one mind. And it is working in, as, and through each of us. And we each individually pick up on different thoughts. And so he's saying that there is a mass race consciousness, and we can choose whether we want to be in the milieu of that or to rise above to this mystical place that he's kind of sandwiched this chapter in between these two other chapters intentionally, that we can rise above here to this mystical knowing and use the one mind by relieving ourselves of all of the thoughts that are going on and staying in this divine place of this heaven within, which is so pure, which is the Christ consciousness, which is the I am. And that we can relieve ourselves of all of the suffering by surrendering to the divine, to spirit, to the one mind. This is his invitation here in this chapter. This is what I get from this. And I know that if you read this, you're going to get it from another way, and someone else is going to get it from another way. We're all going to get it from different ways. There's no coincidence that this chapter is in between those two chapters, and that he's talking about thought a lot and these lower levels of thinking, ways of thinking in our human mind. And yet there's this divine way that we can live, where we're beyond and above, and we rise above the race consciousness, the mass consciousness. And we come back to this truth all of the time. We come back to this truth of knowing who we are. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in here, because this is something that is really interesting, and maybe it's not directly oh, thank you. Let's just see who we got here before I carry on, because I want to acknowledge everybody. Dawn. Hi, Dawn. How are you? I get so much from these weekly conversations. Oh, something to think about all week. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn, for being here. And I have popped the slides in underneath that you can access that go along with this, which I'm not actually playing now because it would take up too much time for me to put the slides up backwards and forwards. And Fiona, welcome here. Surrendering or accepting the I am? Yes, absolutely. That we're doing. So let me just go. Yeah, this is the key here. Dissolving any idea of separation. This is what we're all doing. This is the freedom that he talks about as our spiritual principle of the main spiritual belief, and the I believes, and the principle of the 13 principles. The main one is freedom. This freedom from all sense of suffering, and knowing that we are not separate. Hello, Bob. So great to be here with you. Welcome. So how do we do this? We're dissolving all sense of separation, any idea of being bound from the I am. This is what it is. We are tuning into the super cosmic here. We're going above and beyond the psychic, the telepathic, the prophesizing. We're going above and beyond and surrendering into the knowing of this one thing that is happening, that is all love. Freedom. Totally surrendering to God. I'm reading this from the slide. Relinquishing our will and being devoted to God and forsaking the worldly. Now, Ernest Holmes is a qualitative non-dualist. This is what science of mind is, qualitative non-dualism. We are not materialistic. That means that we do not believe that consciousness is made in the brain and that we are creating our lives from our brains. Brain is very important because it is a filter and it is a part of us and who we are, and it allows us to make decisions and go forwards in life. And it's not where consciousness is made. And we're not idealistic in believing that the material world does not exist and that we're living in a dream. We know that this world is the world of form that we're living in. And what we're being invited to do is to live from this place of divinity in this world of form. So we're kind of in three places. We're in this world of divinity, we're in this world of form, and then we are amalgamating this. We're amalgamating these two together. And this is the harmonizing. This is the unity, I believe. This is the uniting that we're being asked to do, is to check ourselves in every moment that we are being this vessel and this channel for the divine in each and every moment in this world of form, in our humanness as our humanness. Not always easy in all of these worlds. No, it is not. And it's a practice that we are invited to practice day in, day out, because our soul is evolving. We are on an adventure here. And as Ernest Holmes teaches, that as the physical dissolves, as we transcend, as we come away from our human experience and we pass, the soul keeps going. The soul is immortal and the soul knows. And this is where all thought is captured and everything is imprinted into our soul with a small s and the oversoul with a big S. It's all one. So this means for me that I'm here, I take responsibility, or I'm accountable for who I am and how I am in the world and with myself. I'm accountable. So this little sentence on the back, or this big sentence, change your thinking, change your life. Well, for a start, life does not here mean that we're born and we die. Right? This word is bigger than this. The meaning of life is bigger than what is written here on the back of the book. Life is an eternal unfolding. It's evolving, ever evolving. So we're changing it not just for this moment now, it's the trajectory of our souls unfolding. And this is what's so powerful, because we have a choice in the moment to be that betterment for our lives ongoing. So the psychic and the telepathic and the medium and even the prophet is dealing with thought on some level. And he's inviting us to really, really deal with the mystical. And a lot of us come into science of mind, many come through into science of mind initially because of the metaphysical, because there's a change that is seemingly needed or wanted for life, a betterment, whether it's health or prosperity or dealing with relationships or whatever. And yet he's saying, let's plunge deeper, let's go deeper. Let's really attune ourselves to the mystical of life, of this experience. And let's put aside the world of form for a moment. Let's really tune into the divine. Let's get intimate with the divine. So I think it's really interesting because I'm a labyrinth facilitator, and I came into this teaching because of the labyrinth and what happened for me in 2012. And I was really thinking about it because yesterday I was on the wonderful Reverend Barbara's show, Joy, just One You. It was an amazing show. And she said to me, "Do you make labyrinths?" And I said, "Oh, I have made some labyrinths, yes, but it's not what I do, in the world, this world at the moment." And I said, "Well, maybe I will. Maybe I need to make some labyrinths." And I was thinking about that last night because I was thinking about the labyrinth, and I've put this in a slide down below. When we make a labyrinth, we begin in the very middle of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is a geometrical design, and it's a meandering pathway that has one entrance and one exit. I'm sure you'll know, you would have walked a labyrinth, and if you haven't, then I'm just saying to you, go walk a labyrinth. There, you can go to World Labyrinth Indicator. It's a website, and they have a directory of all of the labyrinths around the world there. Anyway, I know when I've built a labyrinth, the correct way and the only way to create a labyrinth on the ground, and they're quite big, is to start in the middle. We start in the middle when we create a labyrinth, when we build a labyrinth, or when we draw a labyrinth on paper. We start with a cross in the middle. And then we build the labyrinth from the middle outwards. And that's how that's how the design is created. We don't start on the outer circle, on the outer ring. We start in the middle. Okay, that's when you're building a labyrinth. When you're walking a labyrinth, you start on the outside. I have got the labyrinth slide, but I haven't got. I'm just going to show you here because I'm sure you know what a labyrinth is. Whoop. Anyway, there's the labyrinth. So you start on the outside when you're walking a labyrinth, and you work your way in. And then you get to this heart, and you're there. And then when you're ready, you come out. It's 3 phases. We build the labyrinth from within, and we work our way out. And then we walk in to the labyrinth to go into the middle from the outside in, and then we come out from the inside out. So think about that. I was really feeling into that, and this idea of consciousness and phases of consciousness as well, that there is this transcendent God, this one thing itself, spirit, the one mind, the first cause, the idea, the knowing. It's there. It's the spark. It's this one transcendent. It is seemingly out there, of course, somewhere, and yet it's everywhere, and it's within. It's within. And this is the subjective is within and without. There is no separation. This one path of the labyrinth comes in and out and round, and you come in as you're walking it. You come in and you go out, and you come in and you go out. It's one meandering path. And this is the same for us as we reach that greater understanding of how we can access the divine. We go round in these spirals, and we get to a higher understanding of how to use thought. So from a psychic, a telepathic, a prophesizing point of view, that's one kind of spiral. And as we move up, we can let go of those. We can just dissolve those ways of being, and we can come to that place that's within us and transcendent, knowing that this is the divine I am, the Christ within, and we live our lives from that place. That's impact. That's incredible. And that's the next chapter. That's next week. So that's where I feel to just take that in, for me and for you. Just to know that there is this one infinite intelligence that is mind, that is all giving, all loving, all greatness, and it is infinite, and it is here right now. And that as we plant our seeds, knowing the love in our hearts, into this mind, that it is done, and we can let it be and let it go. And so we're called to really, really be the faith, be of the faith, not in the faith, of the faith of the divine, not faith in this thing, faith of it. Having that faith of it, there's a difference. Are there any comments? Is there anything anybody would like to say? Because I feel now that I've done this, I want to go back and and kind of study even more. I've made so many notes, and there may be some things that you want to add in. There were books that were written, you know, if you want to delve in a little bit more deeply into the subconscious, then go onto the Science of Mind archives, because there's the Master Key System by Charles Haanel, Haanel. He wrote that in 1912, and I'm reading that at the moment. It's an incredible system, because it takes one through quite a few different levels or layers of understanding thought. And then, of course, there's The Power of the Subconscious Mind. That was written in 1963 by Joseph Murphy. So there are books that can take us further into understanding and unpicking the subconscious from the human into the divine. And yet, here in this chapter, Ernest Holmes just going straight for it. Oh, oh, wow. You know what? I'm in awe of your knowledge. I really am. I love this teaching, and I love delving into it. And if you look at the book that what I've done to do, it's like I haven't even said half of it. And sometimes I think I'm maybe not expressing it as clearly as I could. And yet I hope that it's come across in a way that it's been clearly understood on different levels. I believe that spiritual mind treatment is the way to go. And what I'd like to do is to pull together or to do a show sometime. I mean, the Cosmic Prayer is really about spiritual mind treatment, but I'd love to look at Ernest Holmes' different writings about spiritual mind treatment. I really felt the labyrinth in and out. It reminds me of painting mandalas. That's so beautiful. Yes. And it is sacred geometry, the labyrinth. No one really knows its absolute beginning roots. And yet these labyrinths, I think the oldest one is they found one that's really like how many thousands? I don't know, 5,000 years, or I know it can't be as that. But anyway, that's in Sweden. And then there are labyrinths all around the world, some of them tiny, some of them huge. A lot of them are not that big, actually, and they're intimate. The older ones can be very intimate, like they were just made for one person at a time to walk around. And we have the larger ones, Chartres, and all sorts of labyrinths there's one in San Francisco as well that's linked to Chartres in another cathedral. And they're bigger, and labyrinths are all used for so many amazing things. And I think it's a reminder that we are spiraling, you know, we're evolving and we're unfolding. And as we walk and journey step by step, that we see ourselves and life from that another higher place and perspective as we go round and round. We see it again. We can look back and say, okay, I did it that way, that time, and now I'm going to choose to do it differently because the same situation is coming up with different people. I'm going to do it differently the next time. Who's it? Oh my gosh, so many lovely things coming in here. Thank you for saying what you're saying. Yeah, I hope so. I feel that. I feel that. Thank you very much for that. And Carol and is here. She loves the teachings. Yes. And she couldn't comment. Looking forward to watching it. Brilliant. Yes, reply for next week. And I really apologize that I do not have the information in my mind of who the incredible teacher will be next week. And yet I know it will be one of the wonderful ministers that are here with this circle, sharing these teachings on a week-by-week basis. And do watch next week, because next week is so integral. This is about, the Christ consciousness, the I am, being that and being aware of that and acknowledging that within our hearts. So you'll really get that wonderful sweep into that. Okay, we've had the mystical last week, becoming a mystic, being a mystic. We've had how we can up level in our going straight to the divine, and then into Christ consciousness next week. I think these three are really exciting, definitely. Barb, thank you for being here and for who you are. And Prince, yes, it's great to be with you here on the conversations today. You're doing amazing things in the world, as I know all of you are, all of us are sitting in awe. Be in awe of yourself. Be in awe of who you are right now at this time on this planet, doing the work that you're doing. And by being here and tuning into this book in this way, week by week, it's a gift for all of us to be doing this and to be really getting that microscope out and on our lives and on how life works. Yes, please look at the slides. They're in the chat. The link is there, and you can DM me on Facebook if you have any other questions. Please do that. And I am going to go now because I think there's another programming coming up, and you are an amazing day. I know that. Stay with that love in your heart, and remember, know the truth of who you are and live as that truth, and know the love that is here for each of us right now. This love of this divine presence that is both transcendent and immanent, and we are not separate from any of it. We are all one here as love. Blessings to you. Oh, and I'm just going to say, this network is ever expanding, ever evolving, doing amazing things in the world. And this is the donate link. Of course, you are welcome to be a part and woven in. If this has moved you and shaken you and inspired you in any way, then you know that you can tie into this network and show your devotion and your excitement for the new things that are coming in as we reach more people with these teachings and allow for that change to happen, transformation for individuals and for the collective. There's the donate link, and love and blessings to you wherever you are on this beautiful, beautiful planet.